Hey listeners, this is Alex, your host of EOA, Entrepreneurs of Asia. After more than a decade of venture building, bootstrapping, scaling, and now investing in Southeast Asia, I sit down with founders, investors, entrepreneurs who share their hard-earned lessons and stories for the benefit of the Asia ecosystem and beyond. I apologize for the holiday lull. I'm back in the US visiting family and friends for the holiday. I'm wishing everyone else happy holidays as well, and hopefully everyone has a good New Year's full of travels and hopefully free of any form of the pandemic. For today's episode, I spoke with Rajiv Lamba. A few months back, I was able to connect with Rajiv serendipitously, and after a quick chat, I knew we had to have a podcast episode together. Rajiv has built a successful market research company and organically found the pain points that led to founding a company called SurveySensum, a competitor to the famous Qualtrics survey company, which was bought 2 to 3 years back for $8 billion and recently IPO'd with a market cap of $21 billion. In the wake of the Freshworks IPO and even companies from Utah becoming successful, there's great hope for Southeast Asia. In this episode, we discuss Rajiv's background and how he founded NeuroSensum and SurveySensum, and discuss the nature of SaaS in Southeast Asia versus the West. We also talk about how Rajiv tackles product iterations, sales cycles across countries, and lastly, Rajiv answers, ultimately, what does it take to be successful in SaaS in Asia? If you're ready to learn, let's dive in and listen. Rajiv, welcome to the show. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Alex, for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
So today we have with us Rajiv Lamba, founder and CEO of NeuroSensum and SurveySensum. Did I say that correctly?
Rajiv Lamba. Yeah.
Okay, Rajiv Lamba. Okay. So before we begin, I'll just talk a little bit about your background and you could help fill in the details. You were born and raised in India?
That's correct.
Yeah. Which part of India?
I come from a place near Delhi. It's called Faridabad. So that's my hometown.
Okay. And then a long time ago, you decided to move to Southeast Asia, correct?
Yeah, that was in 2004. That's correct. So at 2004, I moved to Jakarta.
What made you want to leave from India to Indonesia? Was there something happening at the time that we didn't know about, or was something exciting that was growing, or what was the opportunity?
So see, in 2004, I finished my MBA. And at that time, I got placed in one of the company in Indonesia. So I didn't know anything about the place. So I just got hired by a company and I thought, okay, it might be a good adventure to go out of India and work in an international market. I didn't have any clue about Indonesia. In fact, the only place that I heard was Bali at that time.
Yeah.
I didn't have any clue what Indonesia looks like, how people are there. So I just thought, I was very young. So I thought, okay, let's go and give it a try. Let's go with this adventure, right?
And it seems that you had like a few years working in India. You did your MBA, and then you kind of went on the adventure, which is over a decade, probably doing market research, right, for corporate companies.
That's correct. So in 2004, I went to Jakarta, and I was there for around 14 years in Indonesia. So I was based in Jakarta. I was doing market research. I've been a market researcher by profession. And in 2018, I moved to Singapore.
Yeah. And it seems that, despite this long corporate experience, you had a bit of entrepreneurial spirit in you. I feel like a lot of young people would be more afraid to leave a completely different context and change their whole life. So do you feel that, that has always been inside of you?
In fact, what happened, that my entrepreneurship journey started in 2011. At that time, I was around 31, 32. So I joined a very small startup, a market research startup, where I got the shareholding. So that was my first entrepreneurship journey in a way. I was one of the shareholders in my previous company, and I was very young. Company was very small. Then me and my partner, we grew the company at that time. At that time, in my previous organization, I also started Vietnam as well as Middle East operations. So I was lucky that I had that 6-7 years of experience very early of my life. So then the company got sold and I cashed out my equity. So that was my first exit. At that time, the word of startup was not that famous. So people used to call business.
Correct.
So I'm joining a small business. So that's what it was.
Yeah.
So that fancy term of startup was not there. So in 2017, I left that company. So I was there for 6 years, made my exit, cashed out my shares, and 2018, I started NeuroSensum.
Yeah. So it actually seems that you've had the whole span of time before this big VC boom, big startup boom, like before 2010. Like that was when there was really absolutely nothing. It was a very quiet time.
And then probably from 2000 onwards, things started to really ramp up really big. By 2012, you had Rocket Internet coming in, and then it started to become popular over the following years. And then seems like at the peak, you were able to sell a company. So that's quite the accomplishment.
Yeah, it was. And, at that time, the concept of fundraising was not there. So we had to be kind of completely dependent on banks for the loans. So there were no, so the banks was the only option for you to get loans at that time. So we used to completely rely on profitable business. Now the game is a bit different right now. So that time, if you're profitable, you can run your own, get your own cash, open up new offices. So that was the concept at that time, like 11 till 17.
And this was, your company was based in Indonesia?
It was based in Indonesia. It's a global firm. So it also had offices in US, UK, but I was managing the Indonesia office.
Would you consider this an SME or medium-sized business?
It was a small size. I think medium size from a research perspective, because in market research it was a medium size. But overall, if you look from across all industries, it was a small size.
Yeah. Which, I mean, 70% of the GDP from Indonesia is driven by SME anyway, right? So
yeah, that's correct.
With that perspective in mind, how long did it take for you to get the company profitable in order to get bank loans to finance it, which is a very different time, right?
So it was in 2011. So when I joined the company, it was already 4 years in inception.
Okay.
So the company started in 2007. I think we became profitable, I think by 2011, we were anyways profitable as a company.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I think within 3-4 years, we became profitable as a unit. And then from there, we scaled up the operations significantly in Indonesia, then started Vietnam and Middle East. Yeah. I think bank loan, we could get the bank loan in 2011-12.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a very different game that you'd have to operate 3-4 years, make a real business, and then you raise capital. How much of that do you carry over into your current companies, NeuroSensum and SurveySensum? It seems that's a guiding principle to have a real business at heart. You're selling, have real value. Then you think about the fundraising piece, or has that changed in modern times for you?
So see, in 2018, of course, when I started NeuroSensum, I wanted to bring technology into the market research. I wanted to disrupt the entire market research industry. So I did 3 rounds of fundraising. But if you ask me honestly, having a profitable business is always in my heart.
Okay.
I believe I don't really believe valuation as a game. I like more, I call it as more as value creation.
Yeah.
So I'm of a leader who likes to build profitable businesses so that the business should be able to self-generate cash. Plus, of course, if your top line is growing, if you're a profitable business, you will anyways get many investors. But the key thing that I always believed is to be self-sustainable as a business as soon as possible. So we started in 2018. We scaled up the business in the last 3-4 years, but we have become already a profitable unit. That doesn't mean that I don't want to raise more funds. Of course, I still want to raise more funds to start new countries and expand the business, because you need cash. And profit sometimes is not enough to expand multiple countries. But at the heart, I always wanted my business to be profitable as soon as possible. So I carried those traditional thoughts of cash flows, good cash flows management, being efficient, but also increasing the top line. So I've never forgotten those fundamentals. Which sometimes I feel when I look at other entrepreneurs, I feel that they don't look at completely those fundamentals. They just want to scale up the top lines, get to second round, third round, fourth round. But I'm a different kind of individual in that.
Would you say one way is better than the other? Would you advise young founders, I guess more specifically in the businesses that in SaaS or in market research, is that the right way to build business, or do you think it's viable to kind of play the other game where you kind of just raise top line and keep raising on that and it becomes a viable business later?
I think I'll not say one is better than other. I like to do what I told you. But do people can play just increasing top line, expanding and raising more money? Of course, that's what I believe is a startup world is all about nowadays. So I will not say that world is a bad world. It depends on the choices of the entrepreneurs. And I think you can still go with that option. But with that option, my only advice to young entrepreneurs will be never to take away the sight of profitability.
Yeah, correct.
Sometimes I think it's okay to expand market, it's okay to build market, it's okay to disrupt market, but the intent should be that over time, my CLV, which is customer life value, should be far greater than the CAC, which is the cost of a customer acquisition.
Correct.
Yeah. And sometimes when I see young entrepreneurs, they just focus on acquisition. Let me keep on acquiring users. They don't care about the leaky buckets. By the time they feel that the buckets are leaking, they anyways leak too much, which means that the cash runs out. Sometimes the cost of acquisition is greater than CLV, which is what I don't like personally. I always believe within 2 or 3 years or within a couple of years, you should be at least making money with the same client. Even if you want to burn, after second or third year, you should be making money from that client. So the CLV ultimately should be far greater than the CAC. And you have to get the efficiencies of scale.
Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately the way you describe it is that you will have more clarity because you actually know what monetizes and what the value and pain point you're solving. So when push comes to shove, if you do need to scale, you know how to more effectively deploy the capital.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes founder may skip steps. They can do what you described, which is just build market faster and bigger, but they kind of need that insights beforehand. Otherwise, later on you get in big trouble where, like you said, you acquire a bunch of a cohort that just doesn't monetize or is just not valuable at all and not sticky, right? And I think we've seen a lot of companies coming and going through this kind of cycles and through the noise, right?
That's correct. And I think, the reality is, when we look at the startup world, we only see companies which have become very successful. We don't know 95% of the companies which have raised money, but they've flopped. So what happens that sometimes the feel of I want to bliss scale without proving your model can be dangerous. I'm of opinion that you prove your model in one country. Once it's successful, then you expand to multiple countries. Then you can bliss scale because you've got the model in place, you've got the product in place, you've got the processes in place. Now you need to multiply.
Correct.
But sometimes people just tend to go too fast, too soon. They hire loads of employees to help them out, and they're not able to get to the second or third round. Then they end up firing many of them and lose the loyalty of the team. So I don't like those kind of businesses personally. I will never run that kind of business. I'm of the opinion you prove yourself in one market, get your process correct, then you get into bliss scale when you think that is the right time.
And I think one nuance is that is very valuable advice. But what happens is that in, say, like a Western market, that cycle could happen faster. Either or even like in China, right? Because it's more homogenous in nature. So when you solve it for one city, scaling to the other city is really no brainer. Whereas it may be different in a fragmented place like Southeast Asia. So the cycle actually might be longer of understanding the value. So I think a lot of people may conflate that, there's a fixed time for the West and Eastern type companies because, if they're successful in 10 years, I should be successful in Asia in 10 years, but that's not necessarily true, right? It actually may take even longer to figure out, something like Southeast Asia because of those differences. So, and whereas it may be 10 years in the West, it actually may be 20 years in the East. And then, of course, if you don't do the correct exercise of understanding, then you probably run out of money, and then you get into a big problem where you have to raise money on a death cycle, down rounds, and this kind of stuff.
You're absolutely correct. I think that's one of the reasons. After doing so well in Indonesia, I realized that possibly the next market I want to get it in US. So now what we've done, we are expanding our operations in US. So we just started that a month back. We already started getting customers from US through our marketing efforts. So from Indonesia, of course, Singapore is our priority, our second market, but US is our big priority right now for the same reasons that you mentioned. Like SaaS is far more acceptable in those markets. It can run at a faster pace. While in Southeast Asia, you need to have your own sweet time.
Yeah. And so before we get into the discussion of SaaS itself, let's paint the picture of how NeuroSensum and SurveySensum were born, right? So you were working in market research for a long time. And then I think essentially NeuroSensum and SurveySensum are a direct result of that experience, right? What was happening with this old market research businesses? What was their bread and butter? What was the pain points, and what led to launching NeuroSensum as your first company?
Yeah, so I think let's talk about NeuroSensum first. So traditionally, the way market research was happening, Alex, that I ask you and you tell me, which is very what we call as a rational response. But we know that consumers, they don't take decisions based on their rational response. Consumers, of us take decisions more at a subconscious level.
Yeah.
Right. And And the techniques, I'll not say the techniques are fuddy-duddy, but that techniques were going on for 30 years from the time, I've seen market research. So I wanted to get into a play where the idea was to go beyond a rational mind. Because when people are taking decisions at subconscious level and we ask people to rationalize, then of course at a rationalization level, especially in Asia, people tend to say very nice and polite responses, which means, do you like my ad? People will say yes. Do you like my product? People will say yes. But that doesn't mean that they like it. So when clients launch a product based on what consumers are saying, many of the time it doesn't fly because it's a claim response. So the idea was to bring a neuro element into market research, which is to understand what people are thinking. Like put a device on the head, understand their brain signals, understand their facial expressions, understand their eye tracking data. So the idea was to bring that component into research so that we can go beyond what consumers are claiming. We can understand what consumers are thinking. So that's how SurveySensum was born. And from the time that we launched, we got really good acceptance in the market because it was a real pain point from the clients that whenever I launch, especially in the field of innovation, whenever I launch a new product, I really want to know the truth. I want to understand what consumers are thinking, not only what they're saying.
Yeah.
And that's how SurveySensum became very famous and successful when we launched it. So that's the small story about how SurveySensum was born.
And so can you help maybe explain a little bit more about that? So what was the exact value in the process that you've innovated with SurveySensum for these kind of big corporate clients when they're launching new products, right? So because there's a lot of buzzwords. You could say AI, you could say machine learning, you could say design process, and all these beautiful things. But a lot of times when you dig underneath, it's really a bunch of plugins and all this kind of stuff, right? What's really driving I don't think SurveySensum, it's a profitable company today, correct?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be a profitable company if it's not delivering the value. So what is underneath the hood, or what's the insight that's driving the conversions for your clients?
Okay, let me give you a very simple example. See, when people, they launch a new commercial, a lot of those commercials are normally tested with the consumers in market research.
Yeah.
So normally clients have always 2 or 3 options to decide from. I've got route A, route B, route C as a commercial. Now, traditionally, when we were doing claim-based research, we were only normally asking on a scale of 1 to 5, how much you like this ad.
Yeah.
So traditionally, because people, they give you such nice and polite answers, the averages can be very similar. Ad A might be 4.2, ad B might be 4.21, ad C might be 4.22. But if you look at these 3 scores, there's no significant difference between them. So what might people they do? They might go back with their gut again. Okay, 4.22 looks slightly higher than 4.2, but this is not significantly higher.
Yeah.
So people will, in spite of doing research, you will still go back to your gut. Then what's the point of doing research?
Yeah.
Right. But the moment we do neuroscience, that's where we can see that from a brain perspective, when we're looking at these 3 campaigns of ABC at a claim level are parity because the averages are same. But when we pick the brain signals, we understand campaign A created more engagement. Okay, because that's how we kind of analyze the data. While campaign C was very, very boring. Let me give you a very classic example. If you see a food category, if I show a mother cooking for the kid, so kid is happy, father is happy, mother is cooking. What do you think consumers will say when they look at that ad? There's good emotion, there's a family bonding. Consumer will say, good ad, right?
Yeah.
But possibly those ads have been seen multiple times in different contexts. So if it's not uniquely executed, because the setting is familiar, the story is not unique. So at a claim level, people will say, I like it because they're showing a mother cooking for the family, and everybody loves doing that in Asia. So at a claim level, people will say, yes, I like it. But at a subconscious level, it's a boring ad if it's not executed differently. Why? Because you have seen these themes over the years, right? In the last 20, 30 years, we would have seen mother cooking, different categories. So it might look at a claim level, it might look great, but at a subconscious level, it might be a very boring ad if it's not executed very differently, if it doesn't have a unique component. So now you can appreciate where the SurveySensum insights comes in, because we are able to understand how brain is responding. Is your brain signal because brain emits the signals like alpha, beta, delta, theta, gamma. So we're able to decode those signals and say, is this a boring ad or is it an engaging ad? So is this really spiking up your neurons in the brain, or are they very stationary? So which signals is it emitting when you're looking at an ad? So if it's emitting a signal of boredom, then it means that I might say that I like it, but I find it very, very boring. So what happens in reality, when you watch that ad, you might just skip that ad and you might switch your channel. It's called zapping.
Yeah.
So traditionally, at a claim level, I would have told client, go ahead, nice ad, good messaging. But when NeuroSensum looks at that ad differently, they say, at a claim level, people, they like it, but subconsciously, they completely get detached with it because it's not differentiated. It's a very familiar setting. It's a very familiar message.
Yeah. And how would you guys account for bias then?
So see, how do you account for bias? There are a couple of things that we do. One is you don't go to only 2 people. You normally have a sample of 100 people.
Okay.
Right. So from 100, we normally look at the database is a bit wider. And second, we do a bit of cleaning up of the data. So from 100, we might take only 90 because we might remove some of the respondents that we talked about, which might be predefined bias. And when we show a commercial, we directly don't show the commercial to the client, right? We normally show a Senatron and suddenly a commercial will come. They don't know that they're going to watch a commercial.
Yeah.
So this is a simple way of kind of explaining.
Okay. And I think what's most interesting is that this is more of like a consulting type agency type model, but I think the more interesting discussion to be had, which has led to the birth of SurveySensum, right? And if I understand correctly, what we discussed before is that SurveySensum essentially is a comparable to the company Qualtrics, right?
Yeah.
And I think the story of Qualtrics is a very fascinating one. I think the story of Ryan Smith starting this as a family business in the basement of Utah, sold it for $8 billion to SAP, but it's now as a for revenue stream for SAP is probably valued closer to $21 billion, right?
Yeah.
And I think what we've seen over the years is just the valuations of SaaS proving over time that it's a lot bigger than anyone ever imagined. And we talked about this before, like more than 10, 15 years ago, everyone thought the largest SaaS business is going to be $1 billion. But if you look at Salesforce today, right, it's it's in hundreds of billions of dollars of market cap and the value it's generating. So I think why don't you tell us, what exactly is SurveySensum and how is that born out of this kind of pain point of NeuroSensum?
Sure. So when we were selling NeuroSensum Consulting, which was the agency business, we realized that there's a big pain point that clients were facing. And they were asking us this question, Rajiv, I love the consulting, but for many, many cases, I cannot afford a consulting service because consulting is expensive.
Yeah.
So even in larger enterprises, they've got 1,000 questions on a monthly basis to answer, but only for few of them, they can go to a consulting. Rest, what they do, they use a gut feel, or they use typical some platforms which are not very great. I don't want to name them on the forum, but they normally use some platform which are not able to give them the insights in a great way. So that's how SurveySensum was born. Then I realized that there's a big gap in the market, that people want faster, cheaper, and better platform. Because for every model, they don't need a consulting. They're saying, I can do it myself, but just give me a product that I can do it myself, which can understand the native languages in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
And second part is because, as we know, that the consumers are going omni-channel, right? Now we are interacting on website, we are interacting on app, we are going to the retail outlets. So consumers from uni-channel have become omni-channel, which means, can I gather my consumer feedback when they come to my website? Can I gather my consumer feedback when they come to my app? Can I gather my consumer feedback when they go to my retail outlet? Can I gather my feedback when they come on my social media pages? So that's how SurveySensum was born, which was to create a AI-enabled survey platform, which is omni-channel in nature, which means a survey platform that you can plug with your CRM, survey platform you can plug with your app, with your website, with all the channels that you're operating with as a client. So the moment customer touches a brand or a service, a survey goes to a customer asking for the feedback. And the moment they give a feedback, with SurveySensum platform, you can look at all the dashboards live. which means you don't have to wait for weeks and months. Normally in consulting, you have to wait for a month to get the insights.
Correct.
So all these dashboards are real-time or omni-channel. And the cost of doing a survey has become very, very cheap now with the platform. But if you cannot afford a consulting, people are using SurveySensum, and that's how SurveySensum was born, which was to make customer feedback more affordable, customer feedback real time, and omni-channel. So that was the entire idea of SurveySensum. Plus, what we did, we created our NLP engines, which is in the native languages. Which means when you ask question in Thai or in Bahasa Indonesia, Bahasa Malay, the algorithm is able to give you a real-time analysis of that feedback. Which normally in a consulting model, we were doing it manually. We were tagging the data manually. Now machine automatically learns and tell you the insights of those open-ended surveys. So,
I mean, I really like this. I really like the story because it seems like it has been organically derived from finding by solving one problem, but then finding more problems and solving those problems, right? But with that in mind, were you aware of Qualtrics as well? Was there any inspiration, or this is just purely coming from your clients and just solving value for what they needed?
So see, in 2018, honestly, I didn't know about Qualtrics. So when we were building SurveySensum, we just knew the pain point. We knew a platform called SurveyMonkey.
Yeah.
We looked at SurveyMonkey. We asked our clients why you don't like SurveyMonkey. We understood what are the pain points with SurveyMonkey.
Yeah.
And then we started creating our product, keeping the pain points of SurveyMonkey in mind. And we also knew Typeform. So Qualtrics, I came to know about Qualtrics in 2019.
Very, very late. This is when they already had sold
Yes.
So
I think possibly that was a bit of my ignorance at that time, that I came to know, I think it was in January 2019 when I came to know about Qualtrics. So when we started SurveySensum, it was around in June 2018.
Okay.
So while we were building it, we were on the right track, but then I came to know about Qualtrics when SAP bought, and suddenly it became very famous because Qualtrics did not have a great presence in Southeast Asia.
Correct.
A lot of their presence were in the developed markets, and of course, over time we came to know more about what Qualtrics is doing. That helped us to get inspiration also. We also, you don't only learn from yourself; you learn from your competition too.
Yeah, correct. And I mean, since you're operating in both markets,
correct. That's how SurveySensum SaaS platform was born.
Do you think it's wise to be running two companies, and how do you manage your time effectively then?
I will not say it's wise to be running two companies. I will never advise people to run two companies. I think for me, it just happened by luck or by design.
Yeah.
I think the great thing was that with NeuroSensum, we always knew the consulting business so well that it became profitable in 7 months.
Oh, wow. Very nice.
So I never had to worry about NeuroSensum fundraising.
Yeah.
And I was lucky that I got some good people on board who were managing NeuroSensum business. Now, so I could devote a lot of time on SurveySensum product building as well as SurveySensum scale up. But if you ask me, it becomes difficult to manage because I still have to oversee the operations of NeuroSensum at times. But it gets difficult for me at times to manage work with personal life, and then work basically means two companies, two brands to look after. But I think initially it was tough. I've got used to it in a way.
And currently, how big is the team now for both sides actually?
Together around, I think 60 people. Yeah.
And how do you guys think about product iteration? How do you roll out features? And especially since you're operating in two markets, customization versus scalability.
Yeah. So see, I think I'm not a big believer of customization.
Okay.
All right. So first of all, when you say how do we do an iteration, what I learned while creating SaaS in the last 4 years, never add features just looking at what competition is doing. Create a minimum viable product and keep on adding features based on your client request. So getting use cases is very, very important. Even at times when we started, we had to give it almost at a free price to begin with. That's okay. Or at a very discounted price, because your customer should ultimately help you to create the product.
Yeah.
So your feature prioritization is based on what customers want, and then you can keep on adding those features, put that into your dictionary, and then keep on adding them as you keep on adding more resources in the team. So that's one bit. Second, we do very less customization. We only touch customization if it's a part of our product scale up. If somebody is asking for a customization and I don't see that as a roadmap for the next 2 years, I will not touch it. I will only do a customization for a client if I see that or of a roadmap within the next 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
So that customization, for example, initially people were asking us dashboards. We did that because we knew that dashboard is a roadmap.
Yeah, correct.
They were asking us a Salesforce integration. We did it because we knew that Salesforce integration is a part of the roadmap.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so customization is entertained only if it's a part of the product roadmap.
Yeah. And so how do you figure out what features are then worthy of taking, like, who takes the data from the customer and then who verifies that this needs to be a part of the roadmap? Because just because a customer tells you they want something doesn't mean it's going to scale for all the customers, because it may be very different.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, sometimes it is something very important. How do you decide what's not important, what's important? And then who's kind of responsible for that?
Yeah, so customer success team is the first entry point in that way. So they are the one who normally collate these requests from the customers. Then it goes to the product lead. The product lead possibly is working with multiple customer success team, and he gets a lot of feedback from these customer success team. And product lead ultimately is the one who takes the call, which means the product lead might not be able to satisfy all customer success managers,
of course.
and he might not be able to satisfy all the clients at the same time, but he's the one who takes the call on setting the hierarchy.
Okay. And then what about your role in that involvement, or have you focused on other parts of the business?
So see, my role initially was I was very much involved in the product in the initial time.
Yeah.
But over time, when the product has become stable, it has become good. I've taken my hands off the product. Of course, I have a weekly call with my product team to understand what they're building, what they're adding. But from a product, my road map has moved, personally for me, has moved from a setting up the marketing and sales. Which is so that's where I devote a lot of my time, which is talking to the marketing team, talking to the sales team. Customer success and product is something I've given it to other person to handle in the team. So while my focus is very much on the marketing and sales acceleration.
And how often are you guys shipping product features or changes? And does it differ from region to region or client to client?
It doesn't differ from client to client. As I said, that we add features. We normally every month we are adding features. So we normally have fixed, unless somebody is really paying huge bucks, that we can do a custom for them, which we normally tend to avoid. But every month we come up with new features that we explain to the other market, to all the clients. But as I mentioned, the processes take all the requests, put that into the dictionary, put that into your to-do list, and then start prioritizing and communicate to clients accordingly.
So is the cycle for shipping slower because of the nature of the clients? They're more sensitive? Because it feels like in something that's more consumer oriented, shipping would be done much faster, almost every day or every few days, right?
See, a couple of reasons for that. Normally because we started with a lot of larger enterprises. Okay, now different large enterprises can have different requests. So initially we were almost doing it on a weekly basis. I think the reason was because product has been 4 years old right now.
Correct.
So what you are talking about is the point where we started 4 years back. At that time, we have to do it every second or third day. But over time, the product has become so big that additional features that we have to do, we don't have to do it on a daily basis because a lot of basics have been taken care of.
Yeah.
Then we kind of then start prioritizing integration, some of the features, which we can roll out on a fortnightly or a monthly basis. So it's not as regular as it was for 4 years back.
I see. And actually, so that means that you were essentially, is it fair to say you were looking for strong product market fit to ensure stickiness and reduce churn when you were shipping faster? And now you're saying it's pretty much a stable product. So now that's why you focus on scale and growth.
That's correct. So I think the key part is to get your product market fit right. If you have not got that right, no matter whatever you do, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So as I was talking to you, right? I mean, the scale should only come when you've proven your product market fit.
Yeah.
So the product has to be stable. It has to be catering to a market, and then you scale it up from there.
Perfect. Yes. Very good advice. So I want to talk about just SaaS in general, because I think SaaS as a category I think the opportunity is still huge for Asia. It's quite mature in the West. We've seen the valuations and how much value in the public markets it's even proven, right? So you've been doing this for the past 4 years, maybe SurveySensum a little bit shorter, I guess. What is the biggest changes in SaaS you've seen in Southeast Asia for the past few years versus say like 10 years ago?
I think in Southeast Asia, SaaS is getting a bit more importance toward 10 years back. People are getting used to DIY. First of all, they're accepting more SaaS overall, and they're also getting used to DIY, not to the level of a developed market, but people are getting ready to learn to do things by themselves. It was not there 10 years back, so people didn't accept DIY as much. And a lot of SaaS actually should be DIY. Of course, there's always a service component involved, which normally comes into play with the larger enterprises. But this is a thing that I've seen with clients now. So because, whether you talk about Zoom, you talk about a lot of other software, they're almost like DIY. So clients have become more acceptable to doing it themselves, learning things, not always hand-holding, like we were hand-holding 10 years back. It has become relatively better from that way.
Okay. But it still requires some hand-holding, right?
Yes, it does. I think in Southeast Asia, that's something that we have seen, that it does require the hand-holding.
Yeah. I mean, a good example is when I was working with a previous company, I was able to convince the owner to buy a similar web account, which is very expensive, right? It's nothing too cheap, which in a sense is like a SaaS product for analytics, so they could use it for competitive data and information. It helps with the performance marketing, the product cycles, all this kind of stuff. But the main problem was I was able to convince the owner, but there was no one who was capable of actually taking the time to understand how to use it and extract the value.
Right.
Is this a common problem that you see as well?
We do. Across whether we talk to large or mid-sized enterprises, if you want the stickiness of the product to go up in Southeast Asia, you need to have the service orientation also. Which means in our costing, we have both. We have a tech element and we also have a service element. So if you think that people will just go log in, pay through Stripe, and it will automatically function, it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the churn becomes very, very high. You cannot move the consumers up the value chain.
Correct. So there are a lot of differences from what I'm hearing, between SaaS from the West and SaaS from the East. And I shared with you before the article from Dev Kare, the partner Lightspeed Ventures, and he likes to categorize it as two different categories, which means that essentially innovation would have to be approached differently for a SaaS company in the US versus a SaaS company in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Would you also agree that these are two separate categories, and that's how you've built very different products?
I think you don't have to build different products, right? I mean, I don't think Qualtrics has built differently their product across markets. I think the key difference that you have to see is a DIY service orientation can go a bit low in a Western market. People can go to the website, they can buy, they can pay through Stripe, and it can automatically happen. That's one bit. Second, the integrations which are required with the ecosystem can be a bit different, depending upon the popularity of the other system that you're working with. So those integrations can differ from markets to market. But I do see with the customers that we've got from US, I do see a far more developed consumers. They understand the customer experience, customer feedback. They use many more features in comparison to what I see in Southeast Asia. So that's one of the big difference that I see there.
So for your team structure then, does that make it more complex because you would need a heavier customer success company in Asia, but then you want to focus more on US? That feels like a lot of yin and yang tension. How do you balance that?
Yeah, it is. I think we have a relatively bigger team for customer success in Indonesia. The reason is because we are serving the larger enterprises in Indonesia. We intentionally did not go to SME in Indonesia because they don't want to pay money.
Yeah.
So we have left that to SurveyMonkey and Typeform and Google Form. So our intention was only to go to larger enterprises, and they need handholding. So we had a relatively biggest customer success team. But in US, because we are going to mid-sized enterprises, our customer success team is small. One person can handle multiple accounts because the number of requests which are coming, they don't come so frequently. Because people can read, they can look at the videos, they're able to do it by themselves, or far more. Yeah.
So, and how do you think about then competing with Qualtrics, or are you serving a different segment completely? Or are you concerned about this, or is the pie big enough globally that it doesn't matter?
I think it doesn't matter. I mean, we don't have to compete with Qualtrics. I don't see it that way. I think this category of SaaS survey platforms are exploding right now. So what is happening over time, the consulting business is getting shrunk to some extent, and a lot of money is moved into DIY platforms. Okay, and at the same time, because these data platforms can be omni-channel in nature, and this category itself is growing tremendously. So we don't have to only compete with one player. I think what I believe is that we have to compete with ourselves. How can we accelerate our growth? There's enough in the market for anybody to have. People who can do it smartly, intelligently, and can retain customers are the ones who will be coming out as champions. So Qualtrics, of course, is one of the biggest companies in the world. They've done well, but as I said, the pie is increasingly growing.
Would you say that your biggest market currently is Indonesia still?
As of now, yes, Indonesia is our biggest market, but now US has started picking up for us.
So what would a sales cycle look like in Indonesia versus the US?
See, again, it's a different kind of clients that we are focusing on. In US, we don't have a person on the ground right now. We are normally targeting through digital efforts or digital marketing.
Yeah.
So in US, because we know that we don't have the individuals on the ground, we're not focusing on larger enterprises. So when we have, because we just started US almost a month back. So when we have a person on the ground or few people on the ground, then focusing on larger enterprises makes sense. So in US, we are normally going to the mid-sized enterprises, and most of that marketing is happening from India, and the conversion is happening from India. So those sales cycles are very small. So it depends. If somebody signs up, then the deals can be closed within 2 or 3 weeks, because the profile of the consumers are a bit different, right? They're normally small to mid-size, and the paycheck is small, and that's where we're looking at velocity.
Okay.
More than the value per customer. So we're looking at the volumes in US market through that approach. In Indonesia, we were normally focusing on the larger enterprises. So that's how it was a bit different, but that's how we started within Indonesia. And those larger enterprises helped us to create a platform which has become so good, and at the same time we are affordable. So we're able to give a lot of good value to our clients in other markets, because the platform is pretty more advanced, but it's not that expensive as other competitors.
Yeah. So I guess back in the day, then closing an Indonesian client must have taken months, or how long did it take?
So normally with any larger enterprises, it can take 2 to 3 months to close a deal. It's a typical norm in a SaaS in a larger enterprise. Yeah, especially in Southeast Asia.
And you would probably need a certain network or understanding to get into these kind of companies, or like how did you know who to target? And I feel that sometimes it could even take 6 months or a year if you are not as familiar.
Yes, so I think one is that, of course, you have to have a good marketing. We do a lot of webinars, we do podcasts, but a lot of webinars, they give us very, very good lead. So it's a good channel to generate leads for us. Plus, of course, we have the sales team on the ground, which helps us to get close to the customers. So that's how normally the large enterprises play works, because it's very relationship-driven business with the large enterprises in Southeast Asia. Yeah. And sometimes you have to build relationship even for 6 months before you move to the next step in terms of deal closure.
So currently, is the headquarters in Singapore or is it in Indonesia?
The headquarters is Singapore.
So how do you justify primarily Indonesian business but being based in Singapore? Especially, does that actually help out because of credibility? Is it too far away from a sales perspective? A lot of people argue you need to be in Indonesia to be effective, or is this not true?
Actually, I think you have to be in Indonesia to be effective. We have got a massive team in Indonesia. Our headquarters is more from a credibility perspective is Singapore, more from a consolidation perspective is Singapore, but we have not focused big in Singapore as of now. Because Indonesia was giving us very, very good returns. Idea was to capture that market as soon as possible. So the focus was very much on the ground team in Indonesia.
So that means before COVID, you were probably spending a lot of time in Indonesia anyway.
Oh, yeah. So I think from Monday to Friday, I was in Indonesia. On the weekend, I was in Singapore. But I think with COVID, everything has gone remote. So the face-to-face meetings are not happening much. So whether you are traveling or not traveling, it doesn't make a big difference from a client perspective.
Has that slowed down growth or changed the way sales will be done in the future? Is this a permanent change, or will it return back to the norm when you need to be on the ground?
See, for us, the growth has accelerated. It has not slowed down. I think the reason is our productivity went up tremendously. We didn't need to have 100 people. We were having 50, 60 people. We are still the same in strength. But overall, the productivity went up, which really helped us. Our growth was tremendous in the last 2 years. Because people were moving to online platforms. Online was a way to go. Will it change moving forward? I think the face-to-face meetings will come back. And I hope it comes back. I get very, very bored, sitting at home and doing the remote calling. I would have loved to be in your studio doing it face to face with you and then going for a drink after that. So I think it's going to change.
That would have been better.
It's going to change, but I think it won't completely go back to pre-COVID. It will be still a hybrid model.
Okay.
Where the remote will still happen, but I think the face-to-face meetings will help it to accelerate the growth, especially events, face-to-face web seminars. That is something which will really help, and a face-to-face interaction with clients.
Do you think that actually then it could help your cost structure and you could reduce certain costs because of this change, or it doesn't really, it's just marginally a little bit changing?
I think it will, to us, I don't think the cost, whatever efficiencies we could build, we already built in the last 2 years. I don't think it's going to change. You see, from a incremental cost perspective, with COVID coming in, what is the extra money that we are paying, which is mainly the Zoom cost. Right? Marketing will still continue. Possibly, rather than having webinars, we might have webinars plus face-to-face seminars.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't see us reducing cost post-COVID era. It might increase costs, honestly, post-COVID, because we might need to have more people on the ground for the face-to-face meetings, and we might start traveling more. But it's good to do that, because that incremental of the cost, you can get a lot of more incremental of the return on the business too.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, essentially, face-to-face could add more leverage and stickiness by building the relationship.
Yeah,
and
that's correct.
Better information too for product cycles and development, right? Yeah. So it sounds like if you were only to focus on Southeast Asia, that means there would be a very limited total addressable market. Is that fair to say?
I think, so I will not say it's limited, because I think even if you look at the TAM of Southeast Asia for our industry, it might be $3 billion approximately. But having said that, for our industry, going to SME doesn't make sense. It's only the larger enterprises play. Velocity can be a bit poor, as you mentioned, because sales cycle will be a bit higher. And I think, in fact, to expand in Southeast Asia, I'm honestly waiting for the travel to start a bit more, because then if you're approaching larger enterprises, you don't have team on the ground, it becomes very, very difficult to close the deals.
Yeah,
it's not that easy unless you're the Microsoft of the world. It might be different because the brand name is big. So I think if we are catering to the larger enterprises within Southeast Asia, I'm just waiting for the borders to open up a bit more. But I think what I have chosen is to go to a developed market like US, and I think it was also for us to prove that the product can work in a big developed market.
Yeah,
it's not only in the developing market where there's a service orientation, but it can also work in a big developed market which can take it as a DIY. This is also for us to prove to ourselves that we can be sustainable in both kind of environments.
Yeah. And thinking about it and listening to you talk, all the global SaaS companies that we do know about, there's almost like this narrative that it's ubiquitous, like Canva and Slack and all these kind of things, that it's very deeply entrenched. But honestly, there's probably it's only very ubiquitous probably in the whole markets that they're in. And of course, there is a global population that uses it. But I think on a global scale, it only scratches just the surface. And I think what you're alluding to is that, you are inherently B2B business, so you're not going to touch SMEs, but a lot of SaaS is going to be emerging markets focused, where it's very consumer oriented. And that's a really, really massive market in terms of SaaS. So even if you're an emerging market SaaS, it could be just as big or even bigger than some of the SaaS companies we know around the world, right?
That's correct. Depends whether if your B2C is your focus, then it can be a different ball game.
Yeah. So it's because commonly it's thought that, if it's emerging market SaaS, there's a limited on TAM size, but it seems that at least in your case, you'd have to have multiple viewpoints and exposure to different worlds, then you become a global company. But it's more like different products, right? Whereas this narrative from the West is that we have a global SaaS company that everyone uses, right? But it seems that you can probably make the same size companies just maybe for a different segment of users and solving different problems that are more emerging markets focused, and just be as big.
Yes, definitely. So I think which goes back to the point: are you a B2B focused SaaS or you're a B2C focused SaaS?
Yeah, correct. And then speaking about B2B SaaS, then how have you seen the best way to sell it? There's typically seen as bottom up SaaS or top down SaaS, or as Dev Kare says, delivery as a model or sales as a model. And sales as a model is you go to the company CIO, CFO, sell the product to them, then you have to sell it to the users, people who are using it. and then eventually the company adopts it in the long sales cycle. And then
Yeah.
I guess the bottom up or the delivery method is that you build a Canva or Slack, and then everyone just starts organically using it. Then eventually the company will pick it up as a corporate account. For you in the space that you've seen, what works best in Southeast Asia for B2B SaaS?
I'll say if you want a bigger size deal, then top down. Might take time, but then you will get a
Top-down.
bigger paycheck. If you're talking about the
Mhm.
B2B large enterprise game, yeah, top down.
Yeah. Have you tried doing bottom up? Because
I
Slack is
tried.
technically bottom up, right?
Yeah, so I think Slack possibly is, say again, whether you want to give it a freebie and a very small price.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so it depends what you want to play. But I think what we did when it started with bottom up in Southeast Asia did not work much for us. Then we went top down for a larger enterprises play. Then that gave us a lot of good results.
Yeah. And it probably inherently points to how the market was like 10 years ago. Not as much knowledge about SaaS, needs more hand holding. So
Yeah.
it kind of does make sense that to build the trust, you have to be more engaged, whereas they're not going to likely play with something that's free.
Yeah.
Unless it's a widely viable product that all the employees demand, but that just probably wasn't happening. I think Microsoft has been entrenched. A lot of these older systems, Outlook.
Yeah.
I know a lot of companies who still vouch for Outlook. So
Yeah, that's correct.
So let me move to the next question. Let's talk about something a little bit more relevant. What do you think about the Freshworks IPO and its current valuation of 11 billion USD? How big do you think these companies in India can get, and do you think that will be the same for Southeast Asia?
I think, of course, they've done a massive job, and I think I'll not comment on the valuation. That's not for me to make a judgment on. But I think a lot of Indian SaaS companies are becoming very proud of the fact that Freshworks has done well. Of course, they've done well in many parts of the world. I think US being the biggest for them, I'm assuming. But I think their business model has been pretty good. If you listen to the founder talking, it's almost like they are competing with Salesforce, good features, affordable price, which I think has done well for them. I think it's a matter of time that they get more entrenched in Southeast Asia and India. But of course, I think developed market is what gives them a lot of money as of now. It has made the entire SaaS business exciting, I'll say.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, no, I was just saying that the more success it brings, the more talent gets driven to it, the more VC money gets into it, and I think you starting so early in the game and building organically. I think if you wanted to, you could ride this wave really big. Assuming everything you're saying is true, the profitability is there, the big market size is there. It's possible if you are ever interested in raising a round, you would probably do very well in this market, I would say.
Sure, thanks. I think that's exactly I think with this Freshworks IPO, I'll say. See, traditionally, VCs in our ecosystem, in Southeast Asia, I'll say SaaS is not at the top of their hierarchy in terms of the category. Possibly because logistics, e-commerce, fintech is what was exploding in our Southeast Asian markets.
Yeah.
And always VCs in Southeast Asia, they always wanted you to have big TAM, big market. So if you're only present in Southeast Asia, they don't really look at that from a B2B perspective. I'm not talking about a B2C SaaS. Now with this Freshworks IPO, I'll say it has completely honestly opened up the game. I'm sure that more VCs will now start looking at SaaS business. Good for us. I think it's time for me to always now go back to the market and check out. But I think having said that, I think it's also important for us to crack a developed market, not only a developing market, so that we have stories from both parts of the world.
Yeah. And then ultimately, I guess, if you are focusing on B2B SaaS in Asia or the space globally, what would the main thing you need to focus on to ensure that you'll be successful in this space and industry?
See, I think I will say, I think great customer success, which is client retention, right? I think service component definitely helps, whether it's about onboarding and picking up the call. So I'm a big believer of building a great customer success team, adding a value to the client. You don't need to be as expensive as the companies in US. You can still be affordable, undercut. But that undercutting doesn't mean that you can sacrifice customer success. So to me, the great value is not only technology, but what people can do with the technology. Which is the entire onboarding element, customer success element that we add to the system. I mean, if you look at Freshworks, classic example of how the growth happened for them. So similar to that, I think providing features, tech is one part, but ensuring that people are using your product, they cannot be greater satisfaction of people using your product to getting a value out of that for them.
Yeah. And I think essentially it's being able to having a team and culture that could listen at scale, right? Because
Right.
essentially you just want to listen to people. What are the problems, and are you actually solving those problems?
Right.
And of course, the bigger you get, the trickier it gets. But essentially, you're trying to build that machine that can do that. And once you deliver the value, I think the dividends will come for sure.
Right. I think that is, to me, is the key, which is to ensure that your clients are successful when they use your products and they talk about you. No matter whatever marketing we do, case studies and a referral marketing, then nothing can beat that. The entire word of mouth that client is talking about you, a client has given you a use case to write about for them, how they benefited from your product. Nothing can beat that.
Okay, so I think I just have a few questions, maybe more personal questions. I think we've hopefully convinced the audience that we should learn more about you.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of, like, more recently, there's a lot of young founders from India coming into Southeast Asia. And some of the entrenched players are saying, oh, what can an Indian person understand about the Southeast Asian market, right? At the same time, I have, a Chinese friend from China building a fintech company in India. So they're saying, what is a Chinese guy doing in the Indian market? How can he succeed? Why should we give him money, right?
Right.
And I think you're maybe different because you've came very long time ago to understand the market. You've worked through it. You've grown through it. You know it really well. But do you think it's possible to be completely foreign, like never been to Indonesia? Like, for example, Buku Kas Buku Warang, within 6 to 9 months, they raised $600 to $100 million.
Yeah.
They have a user base in the millions already. Do you
Yeah.
think this is going to work out, or do you think this is more of people riding the big wave and the sentiment?
I think it can work out, as long as individuals are ready to learn the culture. I think going to a market, learning the culture, making network in that market becomes very, very important. If somebody wants to crack Indonesia and they just go and sit in Indonesia without networking, without understanding the local culture, without having the local team to help them out, they can't be successful. So I think getting to the local, I think you can be successful in any country that you want, right? As long as whether you want to adapt to that culture is a big yes. I believe.
And do you think you move a few decades ago, you moved to Southeast Asia? Have you ever felt? Do you still feel as a minority? Do you feel that they treated you as a minority at one point or another? Has it ever affected you, or how you operate? Or
no, I think in Indonesia, I think I was there for 14 years. It was almost like a home to me. It still is a home. To a large extent. I never felt an outsider there. Of course, I learned the language. That helped me a lot. I think once I came to Singapore is very metropolitan.
Yeah.
Right. So I never felt out of home in both the countries. I think in Southeast Asia, people have got a lot of smile on their face, so you can easily adapt to the culture. Yeah.
That's true. So as long as you're adaptable, it shouldn't be a problem, even if you are a minority.
Yeah. So I think the everything lies with you, right? I mean, how flexible you are as an individual. I think we should not. I mean, I'm not a believer of blaming the outside world. The world is inside us, right? So we are the individuals who have to change ourselves if we want to succeed or make more friends or not to be considered as a minority, right? I mean, if you're ready to mingle with people, then you will never be a minority in any culture.
And in your early 30s, you had a success already. You were part of a successful small business or startup or whatever you want to call it now.
Yeah.
You even had an exit. Most people at that age, if they're successful, they would say it's good enough. How do you view being? Is it fair to say you're a more mature founder? Do you think the startup game is for younger people, or how do you view this?
I think I'll call myself as a more mature founder, and I think to me, age doesn't matter, right? If KFC can be built after 60 years, from the founder, then I think all of us are pretty young. I think, and I think what is the definition of success becomes very, very important, right? Even my previous company, when the company got sold, I made money. Definition cannot be money itself. The definition has to be, the vision has to be what I'm doing with my company, which can disrupt the game that I want to play. Am I playing that game? Am I being true to the vision? And why I'm doing what I'm doing? If that why is only money, then it's a very small why. Right? So whether you're a young entrepreneur or old entrepreneur, doesn't really matter. It's what you want to do with what you're doing. What's the bigger purpose of life? To me, that's a far bigger equation to look at. And that's what drives me. So whether 30 or 40, I still have the same energy when I was in when I was 31. Possibly I've got more maturity and experience, but my energy level has not dropped.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if I'm getting this wrong. I'm pretty sure I heard this in another podcast, or I read it in an article. I think the co-founder of Salesforce was 42 when he started the company.
Yeah.
So that should give hope to a lot of people that even within 10, 20 years, you could build one of the most valuable companies, even though you're older, right?
Right. I mean, as I mentioned, it starts with why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, correct.
What's the vision of the company? What's the vision of the brand?
And my last question then is, you are a family man. How do you manage to raise a family and build a startup and run two companies?
I think work-life balance, I'll say, I think I'm a firm believer that I have to exercise every day. I have to spend my time with my family whenever I can. If I'm not traveling, I should be with them. So I think for me, it's not about long hours. What you do in those limited hours that you're working, I work 9-10 hours a day. I always work 9-10 hours a day. I'm not somebody who, of course, when I was young, I was used to work 14, 15 or 18 hours a day because I was learning at that time. If in those 10 hours, 9 hours, if I can be super productive, if I'm working, I'm working. If I'm doing a podcast, I'm doing a podcast. If I'm with my family, I'm with my family. If I'm exercising, I'm exercising.
Correct.
I think to me that's the mantra. And if we can truly be mindful of what we are doing at what point of time. Some people they feel proud that I've worked 18 hours. I say possibly you don't know how to work productively.
Yeah, correct.
I work 10 hours, but I do very productive work in 10 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that has been the mantra for me from the time I got married. And I think I've been decently successful. I can do better with a family life, but I think I've been decently successful in doing. And I think that's what I believe has kept me going.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect piece of advice for many founders. Doesn't matter where you're on your journey, being mindful of your time and then being present and actually engaging in it, and knowing what you prioritize within that, and then I think you could be successful in the areas that you want to be. Yeah. So,
if I can
is there anything you want? Yeah, go ahead. Add that more.
I think other thing that I've realized in the last 12, 13 years of my life, networking takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So previously, I will go for every network meeting. Sometimes you need to learn when you go for this network meeting. Now, what I realized that I utilize my time only for network meetings, where I can see some benefit coming out, not commercial benefit, but something that I can learn or something I can add.
Yeah.
So what I've done in the last 3-4 years, I've really cut down my networking meetings, but I've become very much sharper with my network meetings. So previously, I'll go for every conference. I'll attend every conference. I'll go for every network meeting. I'll go for every startup meeting. But that used to kind of take a lot of time. And then you get into drinking and then you're socializing. But I think 3-4 years, I think my life has become more peaceful. The growth has come in. Family time has gone better. I think it's only the conscious decision that you make. And to me, I think when you talk about mindfulness, it's a big self-awareness.
Yeah.
If you have a great self-awareness about ourselves, our health, our body, our mind, that really helps in terms of shaping up a person.
I mean, ultimately, it comes down to you doing the homework yourself to understand yourself. Right. And then, of course, how you manifest that into the world and how you want to show up. And then, I think that's really, I completely agree with you. The older I get, moving into my mid 30s now, you have to be more careful with how you spend your time. If not, the next 5-10 years are going to slip by really fast. And then you're going to wonder what happened with that time, which feeds back into the mindfulness piece.
Correct.
So I think, man, very, very wonderful advice. Is there anything you want to plug if people want to contact you, or anything that we should be aware of that's coming up on your end?
No, I think if they want to contact me, ask me anything, I think LinkedIn is a way to go. They can drop me a note.
Yeah, Rajiv Lamba, right?
Rajiv Lamba, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So if you want to reach out, learn more about SurveySensum, NeuroSensum, SaaS, I think there needs to be more content for Southeast Asia from founders like this, because it's not clear, how SaaS is and actual practitioners in it. So I really appreciate your time and sharing your insights. It was a great session.
Thanks, Alex. It's wonderful having a session with you. You asked some very, very interesting question. Got me to think harder.
Okay. All right. Hopefully we can have you again on in the future when there's more success to come.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.
Hey, listeners. Thank you for listening to Rajiv's episode. If you enjoyed the content or learned something new, please share it with your friends or family who would benefit and give us a review on your podcasting platform of choice. So what did we learn today? Ultimately, we want to box things in categories and compartmentalize ideas and concepts in businesses. Often this can be the tunnel vision. After studying and engaging in SaaS companies and the SaaS industry and talking to more founders building SaaS in Asia, it's becoming more clear to me that SaaS is not black or white in terms of being locally grown or being globally focused. With that being said, it's also clear that it's hard to be a global SaaS company and deep in many foreign markets, and maybe it's also hard to be locally deep and have global reach. There seems to be some trade-off there. That being said, it's very possible we are at the crossroads where global SaaS companies can figure out how to localize for emerging problems, or possibly homegrown SaaS companies finding success globally. It's not a zero-sum game. It's important going forward to be able to adapt and grow beyond your current market sizes as SaaS continues to evolve. See you guys back here for next week's episode. EOA out.